The world's most powerful weapons share one hidden weakness. Without these absolutely critical elements, absolutely nothing works at all. Just one single nation alone controls the entire supply chain. And if that supply stops, production collapses instantly. This isn't just a simple delay, it's a strategic chokehold. When the vital shipments stop, the system begins to break. No raw materials available anymore means no production. Even the most advanced weapons become completely useless without them. Without any real strategic support, power fades quickly. Just one single broken chain can shut down the world. The impact spreads very fast, beyond military into everything. Global industrial hubs finally stop, and silence takes over. Decisions are now made very fast, but options are limited. Power doesn't just simply disappear, it gets restricted. Only the very essentials survive. Everything else shuts down. Right at the very center, control remains intact. This isn't just a simple collapse, it's controlled imbalance. the entire world slows down, piece by piece. Everything really depends right now on something this small. The next war won't begin with weapons. It will begin when the supply stops. The most powerful weapons ever created were designed to dominate the future of warfare. They move faster than sound, faster than reaction, faster than defense systems can respond. But hidden deep inside these advanced machines lies a weakness no one talks about, a dependency so critical that without it, these weapons simply cannot function. It doesn't come from labs or factories or technology companies. It comes from the ground, buried in remote regions, extracted in silence, controlled by a single nation. And if that supply stops, everything stops. Not slowly, but instantly. This is the hidden chokehold shaping global power. The transformation from raw earth to strategic material is neither simple nor clean. It requires complex chemical processes, high precision separation, and immense industrial capacity. Most nations once attempted this, but abandoned it due to cost and environmental damage. The process is toxic, expensive, and difficult to scale. But one country made a different decision. Instead of walking away, it doubled down, investing heavily, expanding quietly, and mastering every stage of the chain. Mining was only the beginning. Refining became the real weapon. And today, that weapon is fully operational. From these facilities, something extraordinary is created. Magnets stronger than anything found in nature. Small, lightweight, but incredibly powerful. These are not ordinary components. They are the heart of modern guidance systems. They allow missiles to adjust mid-flight, aircraft to stabilize at extreme speeds, and systems to respond instantly. Without them, precision disappears, control is lost, and the entire system becomes useless. This is where raw material becomes strategic dominance. What makes this system truly powerful is not just production, but control. From extraction to refinement to export, the entire chain is tightly integrated. Materials flow outward, but control remains centralized. Every shipment, every contract, every dependency builds influence. Countries across the world rely on this supply, often without realizing its full extent. Factories, defense contractors, technology firms, all connected to the same source. And as this network expanded, alternatives quietly disappeared, competition faded, dependence increased, and a silent monopoly was born. Across the world, military power appears unstoppable. Jets roar into the sky, missiles stand ready, systems operate with precision. Everything looks independent, powerful, and self-sufficient. But beneath this illusion lies a hidden connection, a reliance that cannot be seen, but is deeply embedded. Every system, every component carries a piece of that dependency, and without it, performance collapses. Not because of failure, but because of absence. A missing element. That changes everything. A dependency few are prepared to confront. Some elements are designed to survive extreme conditions. Dysprosium, one of the rarest, plays a critical role in high-temperature environments. Without it, systems fail under stress. Heat builds, structures weaken, performance drops. In hypersonic weapons, where temperatures reach unimaginable levels, this element becomes essential. There are no easy substitutes, no quick alternatives, and no shortcuts. Remove it, and the system cannot endure, it simply breaks. Control over resources has always shaped global power, but this time, the leverage is different. It is not oil, not gas, not traditional energy. It is something far more embedded in modern systems, something harder to replace and easier to restrict. And as geopolitical tensions rise, the risk becomes more real. A single decision, a single policy shift can disrupt entire industries. Supply chains freeze, production halts, and power begins to shift, not through force, but through control. The future of warfare is often imagined in speed, power, and innovation, but the true vulnerability lies in something much simpler: supply. Without the materials that make these systems possible, nothing moves forward. No upgrades, no replacements, no new generations of technology. Everything stops, and not because it failed, but because it cannot continue. And in that moment, the balance of power changes. Not with explosions, but with silence. Every day, thousands of tons of critical materials move across the world's oceans. Hidden inside these containers are the building blocks of modern power. They travel quietly, without attention, without headlines. But their destination determines the future of entire industries. From defense contractors to advanced technology firms, everyone depends on this flow, and yet few control where it begins. Because once these materials leave their source, they carry more than value. They carry influence, and that influence shapes decisions far beyond the ports they pass through. This is how control travels silently. Inside advanced manufacturing facilities, the transformation continues. Raw materials evolve into components that power modern systems. Every circuit, every sensor, every control mechanism depends on precision. And that precision depends on materials few can supply. Factories operate at incredible speed, producing technology at scale. But behind this efficiency lies a fragile dependency. If the flow of materials slows, production slows. If it stops, production stops. There are no reserves large enough to sustain long-term disruption, only reliance built over decades. Even beyond Earth, the dependency continues. Satellites orbit silently, connecting communication, navigation, and surveillance systems. They rely on components built from rare Earth materials. Without them, accuracy drops, signals weaken, systems degrade. These are not optional enhancements, they are core requirements for modern infrastructure. From GPS navigation to military reconnaissance, everything depends on precision, and precision depends on material sourced from a controlled supply. Space may seem distant, but its vulnerability is grounded on Earth, and that ground is tightly controlled. There was a time when this industry was not concentrated in one place. Multiple nations once competed in rare Earth production, but the cost was high, not just financially, but environmentally. Toxic waste, pollution, and long-term damage forced many to shut down operations. Facilities were abandoned, expertise was lost, and supply chains collapsed. What remained was a gap, and that gap was filled, not by accident, but by strategy. As others withdrew, one nation expanded, quietly, consistently, and completely, turning retreat into opportunity. Expansion did not happen overnight. It was built step by step, facility by facility, year after year. Investment flowed into infrastructure, research, and scale. Processing capabilities increased, efficiency improved, output expanded. What was once a fragmented industry became centralized. And with centralization came control, not just over production, but over pricing, access, and availability. The system became too large to compete with, too integrated to replicate quickly, and too important to ignore. Across the ocean, another system depends on this supply. Defense contractors build the most advanced weapons in the world. Every component is designed with precision, tested under extreme conditions. But even the most advanced engineering cannot replace missing materials. Guidance systems, sensors, control units, all rely on rare Earth elements. Without them, the system cannot function as intended. Designs become incomplete, production becomes uncertain, and timelines begin to slip. Not because of failure, but because of dependency. As global tensions rise, supply chains become leverage. What was once purely economic becomes strategic. Decisions are no longer about profit, but about power. Access can be restricted, slowed, or redirected, and even small disruptions create large consequences. Industries react instantly, markets shift rapidly, governments respond urgently. The system reveals its fragility, not through collapse, but through pressure. A reminder that dependence always carries risk, and that risk is now unavoidable. Neodymium, one of the most critical elements, powers precision at scale. Its magnetic strength allows systems to operate with unmatched accuracy. In high-speed environments, even the smallest adjustment matters. Missiles rely on it to stay on course, aircraft depend on it for stability, and advanced systems use it for instant response. Without it, control becomes unpredictable, performance declines rapidly, and reliability disappears. This is not enhancement, it is necessity. At first glance, global military power appears unstoppable. Systems are built, deployed, and ready. But beneath this strength lies a single point of failure, a dependency that cannot be ignored and cannot be easily replaced. If the supply chain breaks, everything stops. Production lines freeze. Innovation stalls, and existing systems become harder to maintain, not because technology failed, but because materials disappeared. And in that moment, power shifts silently. The journey of control begins in places few people ever see, remote, isolated, and often harsh beyond imagination. This is where the raw material is taken from the earth. Layer by layer, rock by rock, extracted through force and precision, but what appears to be simple mining is something far more strategic. Because not all deposits are equal, and not all countries have access to them. Geography itself becomes an advantage. And those who control these locations control the beginning of the chain, a chain that the world depends on. Extraction is only the first step. The real complexity begins in separation. Rare earth elements are not found in pure form. They exist mixed together, requiring advanced processes to isolate them. This requires knowledge, precision, and time, a process that few countries have mastered, and even fewer can scale. Because it is not just expensive, it is difficult to sustain, and without this stage, the entire chain collapses. This is where control becomes technical. Over time, the global map began to change. Production shifted, capacity concentrated, alternatives disappeared. What was once distributed became centralized, not by coincidence, but by strategy. As others stepped back, one nation stepped forward, expanding operations, increasing output, and capturing market share, until eventually the balance tipped completely, and what remained was dominance, a position not easily challenged and not easily replaced. Innovation continues, driven by research and development. New systems are designed to be faster, smarter, and more efficient. But innovation does not exist in isolation. It depends on materials that meet extreme requirements. Without those materials, progress slows. Ideas remain theoretical. Prototypes remain incomplete. And advancements stall, because innovation is not just about design. It is about what is physically possible, and that possibility is limited by supply. Innovation depends on what is physically possible, and that possibility is limited by supply. At the final stage, everything comes together, each component carefully assembled into a complete system. Every piece must function perfectly. There is no margin for error. Because at these speeds, even the smallest flaw becomes critical. Guidance systems must respond instantly, structures must withstand extreme stress, and performance must remain consistent. All of this depends on materials hidden inside, materials that cannot be replaced. All of this depends on materials hidden inside, materials that cannot be replaced. Control over supply allows control over timing. Shipments can be delayed, redirected, or restricted. Even small interruptions create ripple effects. Factories slow down, schedules shift, uncertainty grows, and as delays increase, pressure builds, because production depends on consistency. And consistency depends on access. Without it, planning becomes impossible, and operations become unstable. This is how leverage is applied. And consistency depends on access. Without it, planning becomes impossible, and operations become unstable. This is how leverage is applied. Awareness of this vulnerability is not new. Governments understand the risks involved. Strategies are discussed, reports are analyzed, solutions are proposed. But rebuilding supply chains takes time, years, even decades, and the dependency already exists. Changing it is not simple. It requires investment, coordination, and long-term commitment. Until then, reliance continues, and so does the risk. Until then, reliance continues, and so does the risk. Efforts to reduce dependency have begun. New mines are explored, new facilities are planned. Countries attempt to rebuild what was lost, but progress is slow. The scale required is enormous, and the expertise needed is limited. It is not enough to mine. Refining must follow, and refining is the hardest part. Until that gap is closed, dependence remains, and control stays where it is. Until that gap is closed, dependence remains and control stays where it is. At the highest level, performance becomes everything. Speed, accuracy, reliability, all must work together. There is no room for compromise. Every element must function perfectly under extreme conditions. And those elements depend on rare materials. Without them, performance drops instantly. Systems lose precision, and reliability becomes uncertain. This is where dependency becomes critical, because failure is not an option. This is where dependency becomes critical, because failure is not an option. The illusion of independence is powerful. Military systems appear self-sufficient, fully operational, unstoppable. But beneath that image lies a fragile foundation, a supply chain that connects everything. And if that chain breaks, the system cannot sustain itself, not for long, because materials run out, production slows, and eventually, everything stops. Not because of conflict, but because of absence. And that is the real vulnerability. Not because of conflict, but because of absence. And that is the real vulnerability. While the world sleeps, production continues. Facilities operate around the clock, maintaining a constant flow of materials. This is not temporary activity, it is sustained dominance. A system designed for endurance, scale, and control. Every hour of operation strengthens its position. Every shipment reinforces dependency. And every cycle makes alternatives harder to build. Because time itself becomes a weapon. And in this race, one side is far ahead, far enough to shape the outcome. Because time itself becomes a weapon. And in this race, one side is far ahead, far enough to shape the outcome. Control today is not just physical, it is digital. Supply chains are tracked, monitored, and optimized in real time. Every movement is visible, every delay is calculated, every route is controlled. This level of visibility creates advantage because information leads to influence, and influence leads to control. A system that sees everything controls everything, and that system is already in place. A system that sees everything, that controls everything, and that system is already in place. Now imagine, the flow suddenly stops, not permanently, but just long enough to create disruption. Export restrictions tighten, shipments are delayed, access becomes uncertain. And instantly, the system reacts. Factories slow down, production schedules collapse, and uncertainty spreads across industries. Because dependency reveals itself in moments of interruption. Because dependency reveals itself in moments of interruption. Inside defense facilities, the impact becomes visible. Projects slow down, timelines stretch, uncertainty grows, components are missing, systems remain incomplete. Even the most advanced facilities cannot operate without materials. Precision engineering cannot replace absent elements. And without them, production loses momentum. Not because of technical failure, but because of supply interruption. A reminder that even the strongest systems have limits. Limits defined by what they depend on. Limits defined by what they depend on. And those limits are now exposed. The effect does not stay contained. It spreads across borders, across industries, across systems. What begins as a localized disruption becomes global impact. Supply chains connect everything. And when one link weakens, the entire system feels it. Production declines, innovation slows, and progress stalls. Because modern systems are interconnected, and interconnection creates vulnerability. Because modern systems are interconnected, and interconnection creates vulnerability. The future of warfare depends on systems like these, fast, precise, and incredibly advanced. But without the materials inside them, they are incomplete. Potential without execution. Design without function. And power without capability. Because technology alone is not enough. It must be supported by resources. And when those resources are controlled, capability becomes conditional, dependent on access that is not guaranteed. Dependent on access that is not guaranteed. In the end, it all comes down to something small, an element, barely visible, yet incredibly powerful. It does not explode. It does not move. It does not command attention. But without it, nothing else works. This is the paradox of modern power. The smallest components hold the greatest influence, and those who control them control everything built upon them, not through force, but through necessity, a silent form of dominance, one that shapes the future. A silent form of dominance, one that shapes the future. The balance of power is no longer defined by weapons alone. It is defined by what makes those weapons possible. Materials, supply chains, and control. And in this new reality, dominance is not always visible. It operates quietly, beneath the surface, shaping outcomes before conflict begins. By 2030, this control could redefine global power completely, not through war, but through limitation. Not through destruction, but through denial. And as the world continues to advance, one question becomes unavoidable. Who truly controls the future of military power? Who truly controls the future of military power?
Long before rare earth elements became a global concern, the foundation was already being built. At a time when the world saw little value in these materials, China saw something different. Not immediate profit, but long-term leverage. Early investments began quietly and without global attention. Mines were developed, facilities were constructed, expertise was cultivated. While others ignored the opportunity, one nation prepared for the future. As the industry grew, so did its challenges. Rare earth processing came with environmental consequences few were willing to accept. Pollution increased, costs rose, and public pressure intensified. Many countries chose to step away. Shutting down operations, reducing output, abandoning capacity, what seemed like a responsible decision created an unintended gap. A gap in supply, a gap in capability, a gap in control, and that gap did not remain empty for long. It was filled decisively. While others stepped back, China stepped forward, investment increased, capacity expanded, infrastructure scaled. But this was not random growth. It was coordinated, strategic, and deliberate. Each facility connected to the next, each process linked into a larger system. Mining, refining, manufacturing, all integrated, creating a supply chain that was not just efficient, but dominant. This was not just industrial growth, it was policy, guided by long-term planning and supported by national strategy. Rare earths were identified as critical, not just for industry, but for influence. Policies encouraged production, supported expansion, and protected control. This was not a market-driven outcome, it was a strategic decision, one that reshaped the global supply chain completely. Control of production was only the beginning, distribution became the next step. Exports expanded rapidly, reaching markets across the world. Industries became dependent on this supply. Contracts were established, relationships were built, reliance increased. Over time, alternatives disappeared, because competing systems could not match the scale or the cost. But the real power was not in raw materials, it was in what those materials became. Magnets, components, advanced systems, high-value products built from low-cost resources. By moving up the value chain, control increased, because exporting finished components creates deeper dependency, not just on materials, but on manufacturing. And manufacturing is harder to replace. This is where control becomes embedded. As demand for advanced systems increased, so did dependency. Military programs expanded, requiring more materials than ever before. Supply chains stretched, reaching deeper into controlled sources. And as reliance grew, vulnerability increased. Because scaling production requires stable supply, and stable supply requires control. Without it, growth becomes fragile, and fragility introduces risk that cannot be ignored. At some point, the balance shifted completely. What was once shared became centralized. What was once competitive became controlled, and what was once optional became essential. The world did not notice immediately, because the system continued to function. But beneath the surface, the structure had changed. Dependence replaced independence, and control became concentrated. At full capacity, the system appears seamless. Materials flow continuously, connecting continents and industries. Factories operate without interruption, systems function with precision, everything moves according to plan. But beneath this efficiency lies a deeper truth. Every step depends on a controlled origin, a single point that feeds the entire network. And when a system depends on one source, it becomes predictable. Control is not always visible. Sometimes it exists in process, approvals, permissions, documentation. Each step creates an opportunity to influence outcomes. Shipments can be prioritized, delayed, or restricted. Not dramatically, but subtly. Enough to shift timelines, enough to create pressure, and enough to remind others where control truly exists. This is how leverage operates quietly. On the other side, planning becomes more complex. Military systems require long-term procurement strategies. Every component must be accounted for years in advance, but when supply is uncertain, planning becomes fragile. Contracts lose reliability, forecasts become unpredictable, and contingency plans become necessary because dependency introduces uncertainty, and uncertainty affects readiness. Sometimes, control becomes visible, policies change, quotas are introduced, restrictions are announced. The system reacts instantly. Markets shift, industries adjust, governments respond. What was once assumed to be stable becomes uncertain because access is no longer guaranteed. It becomes conditional, dependent on decisions beyond control. And in that moment, the reality becomes clear. The impact spreads beyond factories. Financial markets respond to uncertainty instantly. Companies adjust projections. Investors reassess risk because supply disruptions affect profitability, and profitability drives decision-making. Entire sectors feel the pressure, not through direct conflict but through economic influence. A reminder that control extends beyond production. Efforts to break dependency continue. Research teams search for alternatives. New materials are tested, new methods explored. But replacing rare earth elements is not simple. Their properties are unique. Their performance is unmatched, and substitutes often fall short. Progress is slow. Because innovation cannot easily replicate nature, and nature is limited. As pressure increases, the system begins to strain, production slows, timelines extend, uncertainty grows. Even small delays create larger disruptions, because modern systems operate on precision timing. Missing one component affects the entire structure. Projects fall behind schedule, costs increase, and confidence declines. A system built for efficiency struggles under disruption, and that disruption is controlled. While others struggle, the source remains stable, production continues, supply remains controlled. The system does not collapse, it adjusts, because control provides flexibility, and flexibility provides advantage. Decisions can be made quickly and implemented immediately. While others react, the source acts, maintaining position, maintaining influence, maintaining control. At its core, the system is simple. Many depend on one source, many operate on one supply. Many advance based on one foundation. And when that foundation is controlled, everything built on it becomes conditional. Power is no longer just about strength, it is about access, and access is controlled. Quietly, precisely, and completely. This is the architecture of modern dominance. Inside the most powerful defense institution in the world, the problem is already understood. Not publicly, not loudly, but internally. Reports outline the risks, assessments highlight vulnerabilities. The issue is not capability, it is continuity, because modern defense systems depend on uninterrupted supply. And when supply is uncertain, readiness becomes conditional. A silent vulnerability hidden behind visible strength, one that cannot be ignored. Data reveals what visuals cannot. Supply chains mapped across the globe show a clear pattern. A concentration edge, difficult to diversify, harder to replace. Analysts model scenarios, disruptions, restrictions, delays. Each simulation leads to the same conclusion. Dependency creates vulnerability, and vulnerability affects strategy. Because planning requires certainty, and certainty no longer exists, only probability, simulations paint a clear picture. If supply is restricted, even temporarily, the effects are immediate. Production slows within weeks, delays compound over months. And within a short period, capability begins to degrade, not because systems fail, but because they cannot be completed. Existing inventories provide limited buffer, but once depleted, recovery becomes difficult because rebuilding supply chains takes years, not weeks, not months, but years. The impact begins quietly. Assembly lines slow, not stop at first. Components are missing, but production continues where possible. Delays are absorbed, schedules adjusted. But over time, the gaps grow larger. Incomplete systems accumulate, efficiency declines, and output decreases until eventually the system cannot sustain itself and operations begin to halt. The problem is not limited to production. Maintenance becomes a challenge. Existing systems require continuous support. Parts wear out, components degrade, replacements are needed. Without supply, maintenance becomes difficult. Systems remain operational, but for limited time. Over time, readiness declines. Not because of conflict, but because of scarcity, a slow degradation that cannot be reversed easily and cannot be ignored. In times of tension, supply becomes leverage. Access can be restricted, intentionally or strategically, not as an act of war, but as a tool of influence. Because restricting supply creates pressure. Pressure affects decisions, and decisions shape outcomes. This is not theoretical. It is already possible, and in the right moment, it becomes powerful. A silent form of control. Efforts to counter this vulnerability are underway. Policies are being drafted, strategies developed, investments planned. But progress takes time. Building new supply chains is not immediate. It requires infrastructure, expertise, and coordination. Even with urgency, results are slow because replacing an entire system is not simple. And time is limited, the gap remains, and the risk continues. New efforts aim to reduce dependency. Mines are being developed, facilities constructed, countries attempt to rebuild lost capacity. But scale takes time, and expertise cannot be created instantly. Even with investment, progress is gradual. Because the system being replaced took decades to build, and catching up requires more than effort. It requires time. Time that may not be available. Looking toward the future, dependence only increases. Next generation systems require even more advanced materials. AI-driven warfare, autonomous systems, high-speed weapons, all depend on precision components. And those components depend on rare earth elements. As technology advances, reliance deepens, not decreases. Creating a future where dependency is even greater and vulnerability is even stronger, a risk that grows over time. By 2030, the situation reaches a critical point. Dependency becomes deeply embedded across all systems. Alternatives remain incomplete, and supply remains concentrated. At that moment, control becomes decisive. Not just influential, but defining. Because without access, systems cannot evolve. Without evolution, capability stagnates. And without capability in power shifts, quietly but completely. At the highest level, the issue becomes unavoidable. Leaders gather, not just to discuss policy, but to confront reality. Because the balance of power is shifting quietly but decisively. What once seemed like an economic matter is now strategic. Dependence has reached a level where it cannot be ignored. Every decision now carries consequence. Every delay increases risk. And every solution requires time that may not exist. This is no longer theoretical, it is immediate. Military strength is displayed across the world. Power is projected through movement, precision, and coordination. Systems appear ready, capable, and dominant. But beneath this display lies a hidden constraint. Every system depends on materials that are not fully controlled. And without control, strength becomes conditional, not in appearance, but in sustainability. Because power is not just about what exists today, it is about what can be sustained tomorrow. And that sustainability is now uncertain. Then the scenario becomes real. Restrictions tighten, shipments stop, access is limited, not completely, but enough to disrupt. And disruption spreads instantly. Factories slow, production halts, systems are delayed. What was once stable becomes uncertain, because even partial restriction creates full impact. And the system, built on continuous flow, cannot adapt quickly. This is the moment when control is exercised and its effects become visible. Inside the Pentagon, urgency replaces planning. Reports arrive faster than decisions can be made. Supply disruptions begin to affect operations. Programs face delays, timelines collapse, and contingency plans are activated, but options are limited. Because the dependency already exists and alternatives are not ready, this is not a failure of strategy, it is a consequence of reliance. Because the dependency already exists and alternatives are not ready, this is not a failure of strategy, it is a consequence of reliance. Across the defense industry, the impact spreads rapidly. Production lines shut down, not gradually, but abruptly. Incomplete systems remain unfinished. Deadlines are missed, contracts are delayed, and capacity begins to shrink, because without materials, production cannot continue. This is not a slowdown, it is a pause that affects everything, and everyone connected to the system. And everyone connected to the system, the most advanced systems in the world, now stand incomplete, designed for speed, precision, and dominance, but unable to function without the materials they depend on. This is the reality of modern warfare. Technology alone is not enough. It must be supported, sustained, and supplied. Without that, capability disappears, not because of failure, but because of absence. A silent limitation, yet with massive consequences, one that cannot be ignored. In the end, and power does not begin with weapons. It begins with what makes those weapons possible. Small, unseen, but essential elements. Without them, nothing else works. This is the foundation of modern capability, and when that foundation is controlled, everything above it becomes dependent. Not just systems, but strategies, decisions, and outcomes. Because control at the smallest level creates dominance at the highest level. A reality that is now impossible to ignore. By 2030, the outcome may already be decided, not through conflicts, but through control. A system built over decades, now reaching its full potential. Where access determines capability and capability defines power, the question is no longer whether dependency exists, it is how far its consequences will reach. Because what happens next is not about building systems, it is about surviving without them, and that is where the real story begins. When control starts to tighten.
It doesn't begin with explosions. There are no warning sirens, no visible attacks. Only data, shifting quietly on screens. Alerts begin to appear, one after another. Small disruptions at first, barely noticeable, but quickly, they begin to connect. Patterns emerge, and those patterns point to something deeper, a system starting to fracture from the inside. Across global trade routes, movement slows, ships wait, ports stall, operations pause. Not because of weather or accident, but because something is missing. Approvals stop. Shipments delay, and uncertainty spreads through logistics networks. The system, designed for constant flow, begins to hesitate. And hesitation leads to breakdown, a chain reaction already in motion. Inside factories, the impact becomes visible. Production slows, then stops. Machines fall silent one after another, not because they are broken, but because they cannot continue. Critical components are missing, and without them, the system cannot operate. Efficiency disappears, momentum collapses, and silence replaces motion. At first, it seems temporary, a delay, a miscalculation, a supply issue, but the numbers tell a different story. Stock levels drop, then disappear. Orders remain unfulfilled, replacements do not arrive, and the reality becomes clear. This is not a delay, it is a disruption, one that cannot be quickly resolved. The effects reach military systems quickly, operations slow, readiness declines. Aircraft remain grounded, systems remain inactive, maintenance becomes difficult, because parts are no longer available. Without replacements, wear accumulates. And reliability decreases, not suddenly, but steadily, until capability begins to fade, a slow erosion of power. Efforts to adapt begin immediately. Technicians attempt repairs. Engineers search for alternatives. Temporary solutions are tested, but limitations become clear. Without proper materials, systems cannot be restored. Improvisation replaces precision. And precision is essential, because in advanced systems, accuracy defines performance, and without accuracy, systems fail completely. The situation becomes public. Reports emerge, headlines spread, awareness grows. Markets react instantly. Industries begin to feel the pressure. What started as a supply issue becomes a global concern, because the impact is widespread, affecting multiple sectors simultaneously, from defense to technology to infrastructure, a disruption that cannot be contained and cannot be ignored. The realization spreads quickly. Everything is connected. Every system, every industry, every capability, all linked through a single supply chain. And when that chain breaks, everything feels it. Not gradually, but simultaneously, because interdependence amplifies impact. And amplification creates vulnerability, a vulnerability now fully exposed for the world to see. At first, the disruption feels distant, a problem somewhere else affecting someone else. But slowly, it reaches the surface. Cities begin to slow, systems begin to lag. Services delay, operations struggle, because modern life depends on invisible systems. And those systems depend on materials few understand. As disruption spreads, daily routines begin to change, subtly but noticeably. A shift that cannot be ignored. Technology production slows across the world. Factories that once operated continuously fall silent. Without critical components, assembly cannot continue. Supply shortages turn into production failures. Employees are sent home, operations suspended, not because demand is low, but because supply is missing. A reversal of normal conditions, where capability exists but materials do not, creating a gap that cannot be filled, and a system that cannot function. Even transportation begins to feel the strain. Aircraft remain grounded, not due to weather, but maintenance. Critical components are unavailable, repairs cannot be completed, and safety cannot be compromised. Flights are delayed, then canceled. Movement slows across regions, because systems depend on continuous support. And without supply, support disappears, leaving operations incomplete. The explanation finally reaches the public, a complex system reduced to a simple truth. Everything depends on a few critical materials, and those materials come from limited sources. As awareness spreads, so does concern, because the implications are clear. This is not a localized issue, it is global, and it affects everything connected to modern technology, which means it affects everything. Markets react with intensity. Uncertainty drives rapid changes. Investments shift, valuations drop, confidence declines, because supply disruptions affect profitability, and profitability drives markets. Industries tied to technology, defense, and manufacturing feel the impact first. But the effect does not stop there. It spreads across sectors, across regions, creating instability and increasing pressure. Governments respond quickly, emergency meetings are held, strategies are discussed. Public statements attempt to reassure stability, but behind closed doors, the situation is different, because solutions are limited. and time is short. The system cannot be rebuilt instantly. And alternatives are not ready. This is not a problem that can be solved overnight. It requires time, and time is running out. Military capability begins to shift, not dramatically, but noticeably. Training exercises reduce, readiness declines. Systems are preserved rather than deployed because maintaining them becomes difficult. Resources are limited, and priorities must be adjusted. This is not defeat, but constraint. A limitation imposed by supply, one that affects even the strongest forces. Attempts to adapt continue, new technologies are tested, alternative materials explored, but progress is slow because the gap is not easy to fill. Rare earth elements offer unique properties, properties that cannot be easily replaced, and without them, performance suffers, projects stall, innovation slows, and the future becomes uncertain. At this point, the reality is undeniable, everything is connected, and everything depends on the same foundation. When that foundation weakens, everything above it follows, not in isolation, but together. A synchronized slowdown across systems, across industries, across nations. This is not just disruption, this is systemic failure. The collapse does not happen all at once. It spreads quietly, steadily. Sections of systems begin to fail. Power grids feel the strain, industrial zones go dark, production stops completely, and the rhythm of modern life begins to break, not violently, but gradually. A silent unraveling of everything built on constant supply. Supply chains reach a breaking point. Warehouses empty, routes disappear, systems freeze. There is nothing left to distribute. No materials, no components, no flow. The chain, once continuous, is now broken, and without connection, nothing moves. Every system depends on input, and input has stopped, leaving output impossible, and operations silent. What was once isolated becomes connected. Failures begin to synchronize across industries, across regions, across systems. One disruption triggers another, and another, until the system reaches a tipping point, where recovery becomes difficult and stability becomes uncertain. This is no longer disruption, this is cascade failure. Everything depends on the flow, and when the flow stops, the entire system begins to collapse upon itself. Military capability contracts. Operations reduce, deployments slow. Readiness declines, not because of strategic choice, but necessity. Resources must be preserved, systems must be protected, because replacement is uncertain, maintenance is limited, and supply is restricted. This is not retreat, it is containment. The shield that once protected nations is now weakened by the very technology it relied upon. Priorities shift quickly. Critical systems are maintained. Non-essential operations are shut down. Decisions become harder because resources are limited and choices have consequences. What continues and what stops defines capability, and capability defines power. A difficult balance under increasing pressure. Every choice carries a cost. Every action is a calculation of survival in an era of scarcity. Public awareness grows rapidly. Leaders address the situation. Reassurance is offered, but uncertainty remains. Because the problem is complex and solutions are limited, confidence begins to weaken as reality becomes clear. This is not temporary, it is structural, and it affects everything. The promise of constant progress is replaced by the reality of systemic fragility. Economic systems begin to contract. Activity slows, growth reverses, stability weakens. Businesses cannot operate without supply. And without operation, economies decline. The impact spreads quickly, across sectors, across regions, across markets. Because everything is connected, and connection amplifies disruption, creating widespread impact that cannot be contained. A global engine, built for speed, now grinds to a halt as its critical fuel source is withheld. At the center, control remains. Production continues, but selectively. Supply is managed, not stopped. Because control allows precision, decisions can be targeted and impact can be directed. This is not collapse everywhere. It is imbalance. Where some systems fail, others continue. And that difference defines power, the power to decide what continues and what must end. As systems fail, power begins to shift, influence changes, alliances adapt, strategies evolve, because capability defines position. And position defines power. Those who maintain access maintain advantage. Those who do not fall behind. Not through conflict, but through limitation. A shift that happens quietly, but changes everything at a global scale. The map of the world is being redrawn, not by armies, but by the flow of resources. The final realization is unavoidable. This is not equal impact. It is controlled imbalance, where some systems continue and others stop. Not by chance, but by design, because control at the source defines outcomes everywhere else. This is the true nature of modern power. Not destruction, but limitation. Not chaos, but control. A system shaped by access. The link has been pulled, and the world is starting to feel the weight of its own dependence. The system reaches a breaking point, not suddenly, but inevitably. Production stops completely. Machines fall silent. Facilities shut down across regions, and the momentum of decades comes to a halt, not because of destruction, but because of absence. The absence of something small, yet essential. A weakness that was always there. The industrial heart of the world begins to beat slower until it stops entirely. Global movement slows to a standstill. Shipping routes, once crowded, become empty. Ports, once active, fall silent. Trade pauses. Because there is nothing left to move, the chain that connected the world is broken, and without connection, systems cannot function. This is not disruption, it is stoppage, a complete halt. The arteries of global commerce have been blocked at the source. Inside command centers, urgency reaches its peak. Decisions are made faster than ever before. Options are limited, and consequences are immediate. Because the system has reached its limit, there is no buffer left. No reserve to rely on, only response. And response requires resources. Resources that are no longer available. Every minute spent debating is another minute of declining power. The choices left are no longer between good and bad, but between failure and catastrophe. Military power, once dynamic, becomes static. Assets remain in place, unable to operate fully. Not because of strategic choice, but because of limitation. Maintenance cannot continue, production cannot restart, and readiness declines, not visibly at first, but steadily, a gradual loss of capability. That cannot be reversed quickly. The mighty machine of defense is being held hostage by its own complex requirements. A sunset on global dominance, brought about not by war, but by the slow drain of essential components. The most advanced systems ever designed remain unfinished. Not because of lack of knowledge, not because of lack of skill, but because of lack of material. Innovation stops, development pauses, and progress stalls because technology depends on resources. And resources are no longer accessible, a limitation that defines everything. Without the foundation, the structure cannot stand. The future of technology is being held at the gate of its own supply chain. In the end, it all leads back to something small, an element, hidden, unnoticed, but essential. Without it, nothing else works. Not the systems, not the technology, not the power. Everything depends on it, and those who control it control everything built upon it. This is the reality of modern dominance, not visible, but absolute, a silent form of control that defines the future. A tiny fragment of the Earth, now the most powerful tool of influence in human history. The world is no longer balanced. Some systems continue, others stop. Some regions operate, others struggle. Not by coincidence, but by control. Because access determines capability, and capability defines power. This is not equal disruption. It is selective impact, shaped by supply. The lines of influence have been rewritten. Every path now leads to a single dominant source. A new world order is emerging, defined not by borders, but by the flow of critical matter. As systems collapse, control becomes clearer. Not everything stops. Some systems continue because they are supported, because they are supplied, because they are controlled. This is not chaos, it is imbalance, a system shaped by access. And as the world struggles to recover, a new question begins to emerge. Can this dependence ever be broken? The crack in the system has become a chasm, and the future lies on the other side of the divide. After the collapse comes realization, and with realization comes response. Nations begin to act, not out of choice, but necessity. New mining projects are launched, exploration expands across regions once ignored. Because dependence can no longer continue, the cost has become too high and the risk too clear. This is the beginning of change. Mining alone is not enough. The real challenge lies in processing. Facilities must be built from the ground up. Complex systems designed to separate rare earth elements. A process that requires precision, expertise, and time. This is where the gap exists, and where the effort must focus, because without refining, mining has no value, and without value, control cannot shift. This is the true battlefield. At the same time, innovation accelerates. Scientists search for alternatives. New materials, new methods, new possibilities. The goal is simple: reduce dependence, create flexibility, and regain control. But the challenge remains, because replacing nature is never easy, and success is not guaranteed. A new source begins to emerge, not from the ground, but from what has already been built. Recycling becomes critical. Old systems, broken components, discarded technology, all contain valuable materials. Recovering them creates new supply. A secondary chain, less dependent on external control. Small at first, but growing, because every recovered element reduces dependency, and every reduction matters. No single nation can solve this alone. Cooperation becomes essential. Alliances form, strategies align, resources are shared, because rebuilding supply chains requires scale, and scale requires coordination. New partnerships emerge, focused on resilience, not just efficiency. A shift in approach, from dependence to independence, a necessary transformation. Technology becomes part of the solution. Automation increases efficiency. AI optimizes production. New systems reduce cost and improve scale, because competing requires innovation, not just replication. The goal is not to rebuild the old system, but to create a better one, faster, smarter, more resilient, a system designed for the future. Gradually, the balance begins to shift. New sources emerge, supply diversifies. Dependency weakens, not completely, but enough to create change. Because control depends on concentration, and diversification reduces concentration. A slow process, but a critical one that begins to reshape the system. The system begins to evolve, from centralized to distributed, from dependent to resilient. The change is not immediate, but it is visible, because the structure is different, less fragile, more adaptable, and better prepared for disruption, a shift that defines the future. Slowly, systems recover, production resumes, facilities reactivate, and capability returns, not as before, but stronger. Because lessons have been learned, dependency has been exposed, and resilience has been built, a system tested and improved through necessity. Stability returns gradually, markets recover, industries adapt, the system regains momentum, but it is no longer the same. Because awareness has changed everything. The hidden vulnerability is no longer hidden, and decisions are now shaped by that knowledge. A new awareness, a new approach, a new reality. Control does not disappear, but it changes. From absolute to competitive, new players enter the system. New capabilities emerge, and balance begins to form. Because dominance cannot remain unchallenged, not forever, and not without response. This is the new dynamic. Breakthroughs begin to appear, new materials, new designs, new possibilities. Reducing reliance on limited resources, not eliminating it, but transforming it. Because innovation adapts, and adaptation creates opportunity. A future where dependency is reduced and flexibility is increased, a system evolving beyond its limitations towards something new. Collaboration becomes the new strategy. Knowledge is shared, progress accelerates. Because solving global problems requires global effort. No single nation can dominate forever. Not in a connected world, where information moves freely and innovation spreads quickly. This is the new approach, collective, coordinated, and strategic, a different kind of power. The future of warfare changes, not just in capability, but in design. Systems are built for resilience, for adaptability, for independence. Because lessons have been learned, dependency creates vulnerability, and vulnerability must be reduced. This defines the next generation of military power. Balance begins to return, not perfectly, but sufficiently. Power distributes more evenly, influence stabilizes, and the system becomes less fragile because dependence has been reduced, not eliminated, but controlled, creating stability. Where once there was vulnerability, a new equilibrium. The system evolves from fragile to resilient, from centralized to distributed, from dependent to adaptive. This is the future, not perfect, but improved. Built on lessons learned and risks understood, a system that can withstand disruption and continue forward. The truth remains, rare earth elements will always matter, but they no longer define everything. because alternatives exist, and systems adapt. Dependence becomes manageable, not absolute, and control becomes shared, not concentrated, a shift that changes everything. A new generation of facilities begins to rise, not copies of the old system, but improvements. Cleaner, smarter, and more efficient, built with lessons learned from past dependence. Automation reduces cost, technology increases precision, and design focuses on resilience. This is not just recovery, it is transformation, a system rebuilt with intention. The structure of supply begins to change, from one source to many, from concentration to distribution. New regions enter the system, new capacity is created, and new opportunities emerge. Because diversification reduces risk, and risk defines vulnerability, a system no longer dependent on a single point, but supported by many. Then comes a breakthrough, not perfect, but significant. New materials begin to match old performance, not replacing entirely, but reducing reliance. Because even partial substitution changes the equation, it introduces flexibility, it creates options, and options reduce control. This is how dependence begins to break, not instantly, but steadily. A second supply chain emerges, built not from mining, but recovery. Old systems become new resources, recycling scales beyond expectation, turning waste into value, and value into supply, reducing pressure on primary sources, and increasing independence. Because what was once discarded now becomes essential, a hidden reserve finally activated. Collaboration becomes structure, not temporary, but permanent. Nations align resources, industries integrate systems, and supply chains become shared. Because resilience requires scale, and scale requires cooperation. A network replaces isolation, strength replaces dependence, and strategy replaces reaction. Control begins to shift, not lost, but challenged. New supply weakens old dominance, alternatives reduce pressure, and influence becomes shared. This is not a collapse of control, but a transformation of it, from absolute to competitive. A balance begins to form, slowly but clearly. Military capability stabilizes, production resumes without interruption. Systems are completed on time, and readiness returns. Because supply is no longer singular, it is diversified. And diversification creates stability. A system that can adapt continues. A system that depends fails. This is the difference. The next evolution begins. Systems become intelligent. AI predicts disruptions before they happen. Supply chains adapt in real time. Production adjusts instantly, because the goal is not just recovery, it is prevention. A system that anticipates risk and neutralizes it before it becomes impact. The system reaches a new balance, not perfect, but stable. Power distributes more evenly, influence becomes shared, and vulnerability decreases because dependence is reduced, and control is distributed. A new structure emerges, stronger, more resilient, and better prepared. In the end, the lesson is clear. Control creates vulnerability. Dependence creates risk, and risk demands response. The system that once dominated has now evolved, not eliminated, but balanced. Because power is no longer defined by control alone. It is defined by adaptability, and adaptability changes everything. The system begins to stabilize, movement returns, production resumes, and the world reconnects, not as it once was, but as something new, stronger, more aware, more prepared. Because disruption has reshaped the system and forced it to evolve into something better. Capability returns, but with caution. Systems operate, but with awareness. Because the lesson remains, power is not permanent. It depends on what supports it, and that support must be secured, not assumed, not ignored, but understood at every level. The contrast is undeniable, from collapse to recovery, from dependence to resilience, from vulnerability to strength. But the memory remains, a reminder of what was lost and what nearly failed. Because history leaves marks, and those marks shape the future, ensuring it is never repeated. The future is no longer dependent on a single path. It is built on options, multiple materials, multiple sources, multiple strategies. Flexibility replaces rigidity, and adaptability replaces dependence, because systems must evolve to survive disruption, to overcome limitation, and to remain functional in an unpredictable world. The response becomes global, not isolated, but collective, because the challenge is shared, and the solution must be as well. Collaboration replaces competition, knowledge replaces secrecy, and progress accelerates. Because unity creates strength, and strength creates stability, a new foundation for the future. The truth becomes clear. Rare earth elements still matter, but they no longer define everything because dependence has been reduced and control has been shared. Power is no longer concentrated, it is distributed, balanced and more resilient, a system no longer defined by a single weakness. The world moves forward, not unchanged, but improved. Lessons have been learned, systems have been rebuilt, and vulnerabilities have been addressed, because awareness changes everything. And preparation defines survival. This is the new reality, not perfect, but stronger, and ready for what comes next. The next war may never begin with missiles. It may begin with silence, when the materials needed to build them simply stop flowing. And in that moment, the most powerful weapons on Earth will not fire. They will wait, helpless. In a world that finally understands where true power comes from,